Well, to discuss the impact of the military cooperation further, I'm now joined by David Otto Endele, a security analyst and director of the Geneva-based Center for Africa Strategic Security and Strategic Studies. He's joining us via Zoom from London. David, good to see you there. What would you say has informed the U.S. decision to withdraw its troops? And what does this mean for the relations with other Sahel countries and the fight against terrorism?
Well, I think the decision has been based on the fact that the Niger Republic military government has demanded that the U.S. withdraw its forces. So the U.S. has been forced into doing so. I think primarily, the U.S. may have tried to convince the Nigerian authorities that the military base was useful in terms of counterinsurgency operation for Niger, but perhaps they may have struggled to demonstrate some level of effectiveness. I mean, of course, the U.S. has intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions, but that may not have translated, perhaps by the Nigerian government in terms of some practicalities in curbing the insurgency in the region. So this is a big blow. I mean, the U.S. did not expect this to happen. Principally, the anti-French sentiment was attributed specifically to the French. But all of a sudden, the U.S. finds itself in a situation where it is following the footsteps of France in quitting Niger and perhaps other countries that may try to do the same.
So, David, what will be the economic and security impact of the U.S.'s troops withdrawal?
Well, in terms of the security impact, this is a matter of the sovereignty of the states that are concerned. Countries like Niger perhaps do not see that there will be some kind of a major impact. But of course, it all depends on the operational coordination that the airbase served in the first place. If the U.S. airbase, in terms of its intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance missions, did not benefit the Nigerian authorities or the regional authorities, then of course, the gap that will be left by the U.S. Leaving that particular airbase will not be felt. But if, of course, the U.S. had a significant operational capabilities and effectiveness, then of course there will be a gap. But according to the Nigerian government, they do not see that the presence of the U.S. in this actual 2-0 base 1 is an effective tool for Niger. So in terms of regional countries that benefit from this, the likes of Somalia, that has Al-Shabaab, perhaps there might be some effect. But generally, I think, for example, I think the U.S. may just decide to have a military base in Somalia, which it has struggled in so many years to find military bases around the continent. Economically, I don't see any impact, but of course, perhaps, this might be a negative impact on the side of the U.S. because, of course, it will lose one of its most strategic air bases in the region.
And neighboring Chad has also called on the U.S. to withdraw its troops from an army base in the country. What do you make of this?
Yes, the general of the Nigerian army, coup d'armée, they call them, said that the U.S., had been operating within the Aji Kosei air base. And they had demanded, that the U.S. justifies its operation by providing some sort of documentation. But they did fail to do that. And consequently, that has led to the Chadian government asking the U.S. to withdraw its operations from that particular military base and to reconsider some kind of a review of the U.S. joint agreement with Chad in terms of its operation. I think what is going on, Beatrice, is that most of the younger generation of African leaders within the Sahel are kind of looking back at some of the agreements that the United States signed. And operationally, they are thinking, well, this is not really beneficial to the insecurity within the region. But also in terms of the level of coordination, they are having a feeling that, they are not being dragged along by the United States. And, they're just doing whatever they like. So it's kind of, a revolution against some of these Western bases and how they are operated within the continent.
Well, finally, David, what about America's counter-terrorism strategy in the region? What contingency plan does the U.S. have for this, if any at all?
I think congressmen and women will be scratching their heads in terms of, how the U.S. Is going to be able to reposition itself, within the Sahel. I mean, some of these military bases, act as some kind of, the geopolitical military strategy for the U.S. Should there be the need to deploy their forces anywhere around the continent. So if they have to withdraw their forces from this region, then of course, this will be a kick in the teeth of the U.S. in terms of, their geopolitical operations within the continent. So I think there will be some kind of, I mean, if I was advising the U.S. government, I think what I would tell them to do is to review the agreements and the behavior of some of the U.S. state officials, when it comes to, of course, the sovereignty and integrity of these African states. Because, a lot of these leaders are saying, we are not being dragged along, we are being looked down, we don't have, some kind of a disclosure of the operations, and some of them don't even have access to these military bases. So I think it's no longer coordination, it's no longer collaboration. They see it, as some kind of an abuse of the sovereignty of the states. And I think the U.S. is in trouble here.
All right, David Otto Endele joining us there from London. Thank you.